one of the things you get told when you start teaching MBAs, and I've been teaching MBA for about 10 or 11 years, is, you should never show any blood in the water because MBAs are like sharks, they attack.
Backchat, cheek, argument, debate, discussion, disagreement.
For anybody lecturing in an MBA class, is they think, be quite certain there's somebody in front of them who knows as much as they do about their own subject. And that concentrates the mind wonderfully.
You were bound to get students whom you felt were better than you in many respects and had some very important insights. And in addition to that, of course, you were aware that most of the others probably felt that they did know more than you. But of course, you could cope with that okay.
The whole setup was so completely different. It's almost impossible. It's like talking about another world. None of us had computers. You didn't have mobile phones.
This was a time when to have an IBM Golf Ball typewriter was exotic. Punch cards were seen as a very advanced method of data processing. So it's very difficult for people in today's environment to understand where we were coming from at that time.
I can remember my mother telling me that you could now get a barbecued chicken. You could buy a chicken roasted. Which I thought was fascinating and funny because, of course, in the States you got all of these things, but the barbecue chicken had arrived in Ireland in 1964. Big breakthrough.
Actually, 1963 was not a bad time to come back to Ireland. We were just beginning, I think, a fairly major economic step forward.
There was a spirit of movement in Ireland. I mean, Ireland gets these spurts of sudden positivity. And in terms of history, Lemass was empowered, the Dev era was over. And there was a kind of opening up and people were looking positively around them. And the MBA in UCD was part of that. And people looked at things happening and said, yeah, Ireland isn't that bad. The people weren't leaving Ireland at that stage. It was one of these eras when people were coming back to Ireland.
In those days, management was pretty much an art rather than a science. And in 1963, I had taken a course with the Irish Management Institute, because I had been recently appointed as manager and become interested in the whole science of management as opposed to the art which had been practiced, perhaps black art.
Well, no, it all started because the Irish Management Institute in the late 1950s did a major report on management education in Ireland for the then Department of Labour. And that recommended that all the universities, in fact, in Ireland should, in fact, have postgraduate qualifications in management. And Michael McCormick picked up on that. That was in a way why he was the leader of that. And he pushed it then with great difficulty through UCD at the time. There was a lot of resistance. It wasn't even considered academically respectable, as a program.
But Michael had some ferocious rights. I mean, I remember him coming back from meetings, bruised and battered and so on, and he would be a little downcast for maybe 3 or 4 minutes, and then he'd get up and he'd find another way around or over or under or whatever to get what had to be done. I mean, he was what I would consider your academic entrepreneur par excellence.
One of the interesting things I think about the MBA at that stage was that they were attempting to start MBAs in Europe in quite a few places, because it was all American, Harvard and so on. And they had attempted to start one in Manchester, and it failed within a year. They didn't get enough students to get it off the ground. They then attempted to get one going in London, and it was really wobbly at the time when the UCD MBA started. So it's a hell of an achievement for the people in UCD to make it happen.
We started in 1964. That's the first group started, and we ended up in 1966. We were conferred in October '66.
I was the oldest in the class. Richard Hooper was the youngest, and there was a 10-year difference between us. So that's... Yes, but it didn't make any difference. I never felt that there was any difference in age between any of us. We were just a group that were doing this.
But one of my early recollections is actually sitting in Michael McCormick's dining room around the table, sorting out the applications for the first group to come in. And we had about 150 people and we had 15 places. So it was quite a task to do it, but I'm happy to say that we were very pleased with the choice we made on that.
Boy, it was a terrific feeling when I was accepted, because you were just waiting to see what was happening.
We could have actually filled the program from a number of organisations. Just one, ESB, for example, or this Aer Lingus, we could have filled the program from applicants from either of these organisations. But that wasn't the point. We wanted a balance in the program, and we wanted a balance of background, balance of experience, and a balance of qualifications. We'd have loved the balance of gender, but that wasn't possible.
There wasn't a glass ceiling, there was a solid concrete, reinforced concrete ceiling for women. And I don't know whether they're still eligible to be fired or to leave when they got married.
In the public service, they had to leave, or else become only temporary employees.
Up to what time?
Certainly into the 70s.
Yeah. I can't understand how it ever got to the stage that women were considered to be inferior beings. I don't know what. It was a rearguard action on the part of men, of course.
Part of that, allegedly, at the time, the idea was a man is responsible for a family, and any woman who has a job is keeping a man who wants to feed a hungry family out of it.
Yeah.
That was the silly rationale of the idea. It was just misogyny run amok.
There were 14 of us altogether in the class who graduated, yeah.
Everything was rather ad hoc in that first year.
Yes.
The very substantially under-resourced, massively under-resourced. What was done with the limited resources was certainly colossal.
Mm.
We worked in groups, and the teams were set at the beginning of the year, and I really enjoyed the three other people that were with me. And we were very, very critical of each other's performance, and much more critical among ourselves, among the four of us, than we would be to others outside. And so much so that we would set mock exams for the other members of the group. If someone was weak in a particular subject, we would set him an exam and correct it for him and tell him where he went wrong. So this worked very well. It was really participative. And I think this would illustrate the amount of effort we made to get everyone over the line and with a good result.
The boys were very, very, very bright. So you had to work extremely hard to keep your end of the business up.
We also, in the early years, we had quite a lot of part-time teachers, sometimes some past graduates, some people from the outside. The problem there was part-time teachers gave part-time teaching. Mm-hmm. You might get a telephone call 10 o'clock in the morning from Frankfurt saying, I've missed my plane, I won't be there for the 4:30 class. So immediately you had to organise a stand-in or reorganise the timetables.
Our MBA at that stage was 4 nights a week, from 4:30 to 7:30. So you turn up in our church. Since there were so few in the class, you'd certainly be noticed if you weren't there. So you had the 4 nights, which was 12 hours, and then you're expected to do 20 hours a week outside the class, and you had a job. And I was just married when we had a young child. So life for 2 years was virtually nothing but the MBA.
But the great thing about it was the whole family atmosphere that was induced.
Pat and Michael entertained them and minded them quite a lot in their home out in Killiney. It was a wonderful few years to start.
Yeah, well, I mean,
It really was.
You know, this is where the wives actually, the faculty wives, I call them,
Yeah.
would be, intimately involved in the process.
Yeah.
Because that social side of it, at the time, was very important.
Certainly the MBA required, as you were saying there earlier on, really substantial wifely support. Really substantial. And if that wasn't there, the wife cut the grass, the wife changed all the nappies for 2 years.
It was very exciting and very nerve-wracking for Pat and myself, actually, meeting all these new students, if you like, which they were at the time. And in fact, I don't think we were much older than some of those.
No, we weren't.
We weren't.
We were
about the same age as some of them. So.
In fact, some of them were a little bit more.
Yeah, they were. Some of the wives were older than I was at the time. So it was very exciting, a bit nerve-wracking.
That was kind of an interesting time because it was just around the time of the first oil crisis, number one, but we had also joined the European Union, or the EEC as it was called at that point in time. And there was a great sense of optimism in the country because of the fact that we had joined the EEC. And at the same time, the oil crisis came into play and it kind of messed things up for a few years. But you know, it was a great time when we felt sort of that there was huge potential in the country.
The Northern Ireland troubles, as you alluded to, were in full flow, and we had bombs. I remember coming out to UCD and almost being entangled because I had an office up just around the corner from Parnell Street. Missed the Parnell Street bomb by about 15 minutes. I walked down that street to collect my car and drive out of it, and I was only gone. Hadn't crossed the Liffey when the bomb went off behind me. So it was a strange time in Ireland.
One of the guys that was in our class at the time, 73, 75, he was the bomb disposal expert in the army at the time. And the IRA were fairly active at the time. The cross-border campaigns were going well and everything like that. And he had dismantled some of the IRA bombs up around the border, and he was under threat from the IRA, you know, for a number of reasons. So he used to go around armed. So he used to arrive in class with a revolver in a holster under his arm. And it was surreal at the time to see this guy in the class with a kind of, when he threw back his jacket, you see the revolver poking out from the holster. And the funny thing was that none of the lecturers, they ever challenged him on anything during the course of the debates, and that's probably the reason why.
I came to teach in the business school in 1971. In the early stages of the MBA, we didn't have any, there were no classes in entrepreneurship. And at that sort of stage, we would have had a number of people doing the MBA who were running their own companies.
I think it was regarded very highly, very suddenly, and it was easy to see that good people were going in there as students and applying. And it was almost a mark of success to even get onto the programme, let alone succeed in it.
Even though it was a young degree, it had set a very fast pace and quite a demanding pace. If you didn't keep up with it, there was just no chance you would survive it.
It was certainly one of the formative influences in my early career. I think I was about only the second woman ever to do the MBA here in UCD. At the time, I was told that the first woman, who was a very impressive individual, was a nun who was the general manager of Baggot Street Hospital.
She was darn good, she was great, and made a major contribution to the order.
Yes, the night the results came out and she had passed all her exams, Michael said, right, I'm off to the phone now. I'm going to ring Drogheda and get that community of nuns off their knees. Because, of course, they were all praying for Sister Lucy's exams.
The most enjoyable times were certainly the group work that you would do, and more the working late into the night, the 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the morning, trying to put together the projects. And in fact, we did an all-nighter once to turn it around. In fact, that was the time when the North American board came in and reviewed our projects. We presented to the North American board, and that was a big major sweat, and we were up literally all night and trying to produce the slides or the acetates in those days, as they were saying, trying to get them ready, get running down, literally walking in with sellotape on them to put them on the projector and stand up and present, and then just collapse afterwards. So
there's one thing that struck me. It's a moment that I come back to again and again and again, and it was in an economics lecture with Joe Durkin in autumn of 2006. And in Joe's inimitable deadpan style, he predicted with great clarity and great authority and accuracy the extent of the property crash that was coming ahead of us. And his style was so deadpan that we didn't really challenge or debate it, but it is quite remarkable at the time that he predicted the mother of all property crashes coming down the road as an absolute certainty. And I always think back on that as a really significant day.
Didn't know anything about marketing, and Barry O'Leary was our lecturer at the time, and he asked the question at the very start. He said, tell me, class, he said, what would you like to get out of this class, this marketing class? And I put up my hand and I said that I didn't, what I wanted him to do was prove to me that marketing was not a pile of old pony. So at the end of 12 weeks, I had to stand up in front of the class and say, congratulations, Barry, marketing is not a pile of old pony.
So I was one of these characters who had the early block phones, if anybody remembers those, the first mobile phones. So my most embarrassing moment was, of course, when the first time that the mobile phone goes off in the class in 1990.
Our one was Glen Abbey, tights, Dan and Bray. But actually, you helped me with that, JP, because you weren't in our group, but we were struggling with this because the Glen Abbey brand was very old-fashioned, and they wanted to present a new image, but they wanted to hold on to the traditional name of the brand because it was very well known. So you gave me the idea that we'd put kind of a sub-brand on it. We'd have Impressions by Glen Abbey and, you know, whatever else by Glen Abbey and all that. So that was our way of marketing it. It was a company down in Bray. I'm sure it's long gone, I don't know.
I haven't seen the tights in a while.
I really wasn't sure who I was or what it was I was going to end up spending my life working at. And I was 28, still relatively young, but at 28 I felt I should be further along in my career than I actually was. But the wonderful thing, I suppose, about meeting 22 others or 21 others was that they had similar questions to answer.
For me, the whole MBA really generated the business that I'm in and working at now. And now we have a strong product where we're exporting to a number of countries in Europe and further afield.
One of my proudest moments of doing the MBA programme was winning or captaining the winning team for the MBA AI strategy forum last year, which was a really great moment.
I think it is really important to encourage more women to do the MBA. I mean, I'm surprised that in fact the figures haven't significantly balanced over more recent years. I'd like to see more women doing the MBA.
I think having diversity in the class over the 2 years in different professions and industries really helped my learning of the MBA, and it's probably one of the best things about the MBA.
What I think an MBA does, it helps ordinary people, it gives them extra to do extraordinary things. So what's happened, I suppose, since I've left the MBA or during the MBA, I've created a charity. It's in my own mind, it's going to be the biggest charity in the world.
It's corny, but what you put into it is what you get out of it. So really, it's up to the individual and the drive and the enthusiasm that they put into it that will help the results in the end.
The group that we have in this year, 2011, 2012, I have to say, are one of the best group I've ever seen around the Smurfit School. I've got glowing reports from everyone concerned in the school that this class, you know, are I would say, probably the best down-to-earth group of people we've seen in the Smurfit School in a long, long time.
The thing I like the most actually is when you see a class come in and you meet people and you hear about their aspirations and what they want to do. And then when you actually see a class come together and actually see them bond over the year and get to know each other and create friendships that you never get the chance to create in your 30s and 40s.
Approaching class the first day, I think very quickly what you want to do is set the temperature and set the tone. So the way we try to do that is we try to get people involved in thinking about how they want to organise the class and in a way seduce them into thinking that they're going to organise the class they want to do it. And knowing really that in your back pocket you have the plan for the class and you've anticipated most of what they're going to say.
You really cannot go into an MBA class without being really well prepared, without having really good examples.
One of my first classes was the MBA in management accounting. I was 25 years old and I was teaching MBA students, and that was a bit of a white knuckle ride, I have to be honest.
I would regularly expect to get called 3 or 4 times a class where somebody would say, actually, I'm not really sure you're right on that.
A fellow in the class put up his hand and said, no, it doesn't mean such and such, it means something else, you know. I said, okay, well, I don't know if that's right. I think it means whatever I said originally. And then again, a bit of inspiration. I said, well, I mean, how do you know that you're right? And he says, well, I'm the guy who drew up that chart in the central bank report.
The MBA plays a very strong role in business. It's probably the premier qualification that prepares people for senior leadership positions in organisations.
No academic qualification stands out for them and for us more so than an MBA qualification.
One of the things I really like to crack, and it's a difficult one because it's a conversation we have to have, is around values and the values of business. What will the next generation have learned in UCD that will be different from the previous generation, that will make business different, that will make society different, that will make the Irish experience more mature than it was in the last 5 or 10 years?